I'm Lauren Taylor. I'm the Program Director for Livable Communities at the Hyde Family Foundations. And I'm happy to be participating in these Regionsmart conversations. They're very important ones. And we're proud that our foundation invests in ULI Memphis. I'm here to introduce our next speaker, Mitchell Silver, New York City's Parks Commissioner. I had the pleasure of hearing from Commissioner Silver back in February at ULI's session on the importance of comprehensive planning for our city. And with Memphis 3.0 underway, I reflect on how Commissioner Silver emphasized the importance of ensuring participation of all generations and hearing from the voices of younger generations. We're planning for their needs, their future. So I think about that often as we're progressing. My colleague, Erin Barnes, who is the founder of IOBI, which is based in New York but has a presence in Memphis, told me that Mitchell Silver is one of the greatest gifts to New York City. So take note. As Parks Commissioner, he is known for innovative new initiatives with a strong focus on equity that he's introduced to New York City's 30,000-acre park system. Since he became commissioner in 2014, Commissioner Silver has led the launch of some critical initiatives. The Community Parks Initiative, which is bringing $285 million in capital investments to historically underserved parks across New York City. Parks Without Borders, which Erin speaks highly of, and that's a new design approach to activating park borders and edges. And also a $150 million effort to rebuild 5 historic anchor parks across New York City's boroughs. Prior to serving as New York City Commissioner, Commissioner Silver was the Chief Planning and Development Officer and Planning Director for Raleigh, North Carolina. In that role, he led the comprehensive plan update process and a rewriting of the development code to create a vibrant 21st century city. So comprehensive planning is, of course, on our minds right now. And Commissioner Silver, an award-winning planner, has important lessons to share. So I look forward to listening carefully. So with that, Commissioner Silver.
Thank you so much. Well, good evening, everyone. I said evening. It feels like it's been a long day, but I certainly thank you all for being here. Just before I get started, first I understand Dr. Johnson had an emergency. I know him quite well. And so we both talk frequently about demographics, and just want to share with you a quick story before I begin. I do a lot of traveling, and I went to Australia 2 years ago, and I tried to get there a day early. Instead, because of the time change, I got there a few hours before my presentation. And so I was going to talk a little bit about demographics, and I was so tired. You know, I'm a child of mixed race, and I said, "Hi, I'm Mitchell Silver, and I'm mixed use." And everybody kept staring at me, and I said, "Did I say mixed use?" They said, "You did." I said, "Okay, I'm mixed race and mixed use." So I'm here to talk about the value of planning. Although I'm now working in parks, my entire career has been in planning, and I had the luxury of working in Raleigh, one of the great areas of our country that really understands regional planning. When I was here the last time, I was talking about the importance of regional planning, so Anna coaxed me to come back to share some information with you, and so I'll get right to it, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Well, first things first, I do like to put everything in context, and a lot of people don't like to see change. And I want to remind someone, from the beginning of this country has urbanized and will continue to urbanize. And if you just quickly look at this chart, back in the 19th century, U.S. population 5 million, urbanized 6%. Then by 20th century, 76 million, 40%, and it can go on and on and on. And by the 22nd century, by the way, a person born today will live to see the 22nd century. We will, in our country, be 90% urbanized. So that is where we're headed, and the question is, how are we going to handle that growth? And if you look at the United States over the next 50 years, we're going to add another 124 million people to our country. That's roughly about 50 million new housing units and billions of square feet of both commercial growth as well as facilities. And my question to you is, what will that next generation of communities look like, and what will the Memphis metro region look like? The 1960s, the 1970s, or something that's going to be different? And so as a planner, I'm going to share you my perspective. It's very important that we need to understand the emerging trends and issues so we can address uncertainty about the future. When I was here last, talked about the comprehensive plan. The plan is so important. It was one of our primary economic development tools because when we recruited businesses, they wanted to know you had a plan. They want to deal with that uncertainty about the future, and for us, it was the greatest marketing tool. And when I used to speak around the country, people says, oh, we don't want to have a plan. I said, that's great, because we'll take your young people and we'll take your jobs. Because we want to make sure when a company comes in that they know exactly where we're going as a community and that we understand exactly how we're going to plan for the uncertainty going forward. I also believe as a planner, our role is to have a special concern for the long-term consequences of present actions. But more importantly, we have to understand that there are consequences for taking no action. So all of you can hear this wonderful presentation today and say, that's great, but there are consequences for taking no action. We want to talk about that as well. And then finally, as I do all these public meetings, I hear a lot of no out there, and I want to explain to the public that when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. When I was in Raleigh, we kept hearing no to density, no, no, no. But I said, what you're really saying is seniors and young people, we don't want you in our community. Is that what we're really saying? So it's important that we understand the importance of how do we deal with these emerging trends, understand the consequence, and realizing saying no, in fact, has consequences as well. Now, what's nice about Ellen's presentation, I'm sure some of the ones preceding mine, is that you're going to see a lot of similarities to our presentations. That's a good thing. But here are some of the emerging challenges we're all going to face in one level or another. Actually, Ellen was just talking about equity and affordability, which is also on the slide. These are some of the challenges that you're going to face. And in order to address yourselves as a region, you have to understand how these trends are going to affect you. It has implications to economics. It has implications to development. It has implications to everything you do. What's interesting about this list is some issues on this list have never happened before. They're brand new to the 21st century, so you can't Google to find solutions to these problems. We're looking for smart, innovative solutions to address these issues, and the regions that understand that are those that are going to be competitive in the 21st century. So from my perspective, we need to understand emerging trends and issues like a stockbroker watches the market so we can prepare our communities for what's coming. If you're doing a plan, what emerging issues and trends are you solving? You want to plan as a region, what are the emerging issues in your region that you need to be prepared for? Now, Ellen mentioned, and I'm sure Dr. Johnson would say the same, these are demographic changes I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I want to call attention to a few of them to understand exactly how this is going to impact you. Yes, there'll be more older Americans. Yes, they'll be living longer. But the one that's going to shock most people is that by 2030, the majority household in the United States is going to be one person. Not a family, one person. A combination of people decide to get married, not get married, and a widow or widower. That is where we're headed, and that has huge implications on how we're going to plan our communities going forward. So there's something called a silver tsunami. They didn't name it after me, but we have the silver tsunami that is approaching us. And we're now seeing that by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65. And not only that, they'll be living longer because they have healthier lifestyles. And by 2050, the number of Americans over 85 will triple to close to 20 million Americans. And as I stated, by 2025 and there beyond, the number of single-person households will equal that of a family, and then it'll be the clear majority population in this country. So let's just take a look at the transition of the household change. Ellen mentioned 2/3 those living in the suburbs now live without children, but look at the transition between 1960 and 2025 of those households with children. So now, if all of you are developers, I ask you, what type of housing will you be building in 2025? A single family home for a family? No. So this is something we have to address, and in fact, when I was in Raleigh and I predicted about 5 to 6 years before the market started to change, that we have to stop building all the suburban product and start looking at more density and multifamily. The home builders, there was literally a fight. Actually, it was a ULI panel where we went at each other, and it was years later. He was from Toll Brothers. He apologized because they came to me and say, it's now time to go to more multifamily housing, because looking at those trends, we knew the market was changing and we had to change with it. So what's driving that change? We're seeing over time from the 1960s, 5 out of 100 children were born to unwed mothers. That number jumped to almost 40%, 4 to 10, by 2010. And it's not just African Americans, it's across the board. And in fact, today, more than half of the mothers that are single are under 30. This is a trend that's going to be living with us for quite some time. Let's look at some of the marriage rates. Now, I joke around when I go to college campuses and I see this young man talking to this young lady throughout my presentation, and I'll say, young lady, he's not serious. How do I know? This chart tells me so. For whatever reason, that sweet spot where people got married between 25 and 34 is now dropped to half. And you're seeing this change. So as we're planning for places where people are going to live, it's changing rapidly before our very eyes, and we have to understand these trends so you can plan as a city, as a town, as a region, the proper way so you can keep people that are here and attract others to your community. Now, there's something called dying counties. The Census Bureau didn't like that term, so they call them natural decrease. Basically, what it is 25% of all counties in the U.S. are fading away, with West Virginia being the worst. What do we mean by fading away? These shrinking counties consist of older whites who no longer are having children, combined with the exodus of young adults because they're saying, I don't want to live here. I don't like the lifestyle. I don't like the job prospects. I might have gone to school here, but I'm not staying. I'm going somewhere else, to whether it's Nashville or New York. They're not staying. Now, the good news for you is if this is a beige county, those counties are shrinking. So Tennessee, good news, you're not in that bad shape. But keep an eye on these trends to see what is happening in those jurisdictions. I'm going to show you what a bad state looks like, and here is West Virginia. The only reason why that dark spot in that corner is so dark is because people are now living in West Virginia and commuting to Washington, D.C. Metro because homes are more affordable. One of the worst states that I've seen happens to be Kansas. And this is a state, when I went out there, that actually rejects planning. The very approach they need to help pull them out of this despair is something they reject. In fact, there's out-and-out warfare between Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. They keep stealing jobs from each other across the border, because you can see from this map, that dark spot on the border, that's the only game in town. And so this is something, when I went there, they had to watch. And so I had to mediate between Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas to show how they had to move forward and coexist. But these are some of the things I encourage regions to watch out for. So some of the implications, certainly land use patterns and transportation choices will have to change as older Americans realize they can no longer drive. If you didn't know this, about 600,000 Americans over the age of 70 stop driving every year, and they're predicting that visit to friends will drop about 65%. So these are certainly trends that we have to watch as we build for communities of the future. Seniors and younger generations, as Ellen pointed out, will demand different choices about where they live. There's now a preference for smaller homes and rent rather than own. Now, I have to explain to people that it's hard because people believe that renters are subhuman in some cases. They're not real Americans. I'm a renter, and it's something we have to realize that going forward that you're going to see more rental product, and it's something you have to embrace in your community and in your region. And the other point I want to make is that you have to really start to understand the market. Ellen touched on this. For time, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but realize there are 6 generations living at any given time. All of you are on this list. If you're not, you're dead, so I know you're here in this room. But I point this out because each one of these generational profiles have different values, needs, and aspirations for homes, for jobs, for lifestyle choices, for neighborhoods. And we have to understand it's not one single group. The older generation tends to be consumers of goods. The younger generation, they tend to be consumers of experiences. That's where they're looking for places and regions that tap into that experience where they want to stay and live. And so we see this clash right now going on between the different generations, but it's important to understand who lives in your community. So I did that work for you. Here is a chart to show you the breakdown of the greatest silent boomer X, Y, and Z generation in your community. I put Raleigh there. A few years ago, we were at 71% X, Y, and Z split. That's roughly about 50 and younger versus the other places. I found interesting that Nashville and Memphis, you're absolutely identical with your X, Y, Z population. What I put this chart up here, The reason why I put it up is I want to make sure those decision makers, those local governing boards, realize that they're not just planning for themselves. They have to look at the 50, 60, 70% that's going to be here for a very long time, and the planning decisions that you make. Are you willing to give up your today for that next generation's tomorrow? That is the community that you're building. And so this is something we certainly encourage. In Raleigh, we had a very youthful population. The governing body understood that and started to rethink how we're going to plan our city, not just those who are in power or come into public meetings, but that 70% generation that we want to keep in our community so they don't go to school and then leave to somewhere else. It was vitally important. So it's not just about what's next, it's about who's next. And there's going to be this tension over the next years as we see these generational attitudes change, because Gen X is now going to start to move into leadership positions as now they enter their 50s. And so us older generations have to step to the side, help the new generation, but realize the 20th century belonged to us, the 21st century belongs to them. So we're seeing this clash of values between the 20th century and 21st century values, and that will continue to play itself out. So that's the context of demographics, and now I want to share with you a little bit about the value of regional planning. Again, there are very few regions in this country that actually pull this off, and I'll give you one example of where I worked in the Research Triangle Park, which by far is one of the best regions I've worked in that actually understands and embraces the value of regional planning. But before I get into that, I want to share with you this other work. In fact, Ellen's colleague, Catherine Ross, worked in this project called America 2050, and they started looking at these mega regions, these regions that will truly drive or is driving the economy here in the United States. And I would have to say that the Memphis area is probably closest to the Piedmont Atlanta region, and this is one of the regions that will be driving the economy going forward, as well as the others that you see here on this map. This is how places need to compete both nationally and globally. It's by the region. You cannot do this on your own as a small town. You have to look at the larger region on how you're going to compete. What I'm very pleased is ULI actually put out a report that ranked, or at least categorized, some of these U.S. regional markets. Now, in Tennessee, you have Nashville under the creative and nimble. I love that category. And Research Triangle was also in that category. But you begin to understand how markets look at you as a region. And the question is, where do you, Memphis, fit in this category? I also love the comeback kids. These are cities that took a punch in the gut and made this incredible comeback story. Pittsburgh's probably one of my favorites. This is a place that after steel and the whole manufacturing declined, I mean, they lost their soul, they lost their way. And until they got past their past, now they're one of the leading markets when it comes to whether it's energy and technology. This is a perfect example how a city took a punch in the gut, but understood they had to change and let that steel past move behind them. So this is something that I encourage you to aspire to. So let's talk about the Research Triangle market. This is a downtown shot of Raleigh where I worked. So we realized we had some challenges before us. The Research Triangle, we were projected to grow by 1.2 million people, and we had to find a place to accommodate 700,000 jobs over the next 20 years. But we had a bad habit of our nickname in Raleigh was sprawly. So the growth in the triangle, if you look between 1950 and 2000, we grew by 480%, but we consumed 3.5 times that land to accommodate that growth. To show you what it looked like, there's Durham at the top and Raleigh at the bottom. Now, you do know Raleigh and Durham are two different places. I go to a lot of places that say, you're from Raleigh, Durham. I said, you can't be in two cities at once. It's Raleigh and Durham, so there we have the two different cities. So that was the urbanized area in the 1950s before the Research Triangle Park opened. And after it opened, you slowly start to see how the area started to urbanize. Then by the year 2000, you saw some real explosive growth. And then when I got there around that time, we predicted if we did not intervene with a plan for the region, we would look like this. Peanut butter spread across the region, roads would be congested, that incredible lifestyle we enjoyed would just be destroyed. So people said we had to do something. We don't want this as our future, but we decided to work together as a region. We actually used something called Reality Check, which is a ULI program. We wanted to make sure we grew but remained competitive and that we were able to attract and retain skilled workers. We decided up front that there would be regional cooperation, that would be the key to our success. We were too small to do it on our own. We could not compete globally on our own. And in fact, in our region, if Durham got a company, we would cheer, because we knew if there was a job or company opening up there, they actually may buy a house in Raleigh. So we all cheer for each other because we knew how successful we would be if we all worked together. And so we decided that we were going to do this project. We first talked about what connected us together. These were the areas we wanted to make sure we worked on a region. Economic development for us was absolutely key. And so if you don't know the reality check, you basically have a set of Lego blocks, and it represents all the growth, and it has to go somewhere on the map. And it was a great way of people to understand that you can't just say no to growth, it actually had to go somewhere. We did about 20 different tables. This is the one that happened to win. It was my table, so as planning director, I had great credibility. And we decided that vibrant centers would be the approach for the entire region that we were going to deploy. There were guiding principles for this approach, the vibrant centers, transit, vibrant centers, and green space in between. And what was amazing is that we had over 50 municipalities and organizations that passed a resolution to support the reality check principles, and each one of us going to work toward the goals. It wasn't local planning, but we all collectively wanted to work toward this regional goal, and actually it worked. Some of the things we did is that we wanted to make sure we would pass a transit plan. There were 3 counties. You'll see a map in a second. All 3 counties passed the regional plan, the text for transit, for Durham County and Chapel Hill, and then Raleigh just passed theirs in November. We actually came up for the first time with a regional land use map. That was Raleigh's map. We sat down with all the regions and collectively knitted all of our land use maps together so we understood what happened at the borders to see how we can support one another. And then we developed a regional economy approach with ecosystems and targeted clusters. So if a business came to Raleigh and it was industrial, we wouldn't send them away. We would bring them in. Even if it didn't go to Raleigh, it can go to a nearby municipality. We wanted that job to stay in the region. Just because it didn't come to us, Raleigh, we want to make sure it stayed in the region. And we had a regional chamber of commerce that made sure it stayed in the region and not say, you don't want Raleigh, you need to go. You don't want Memphis, you need to go. It must stay in the region. So here is an image of our future transit system that will be built over time. This covers 3 different counties. It ties our economy together through the rail line, and this is something that hopefully will go into construction very soon. Here's an example of the various land use maps that we all sat down. All the planning directors of all the municipalities met on a regular basis, made sure we communicated that our land use maps worked, and that we worked together on all economic development initiatives. I came up with a regional profile that would be successful, access to knowledge and skilled workers. We came up with a cost of living index, and we made sure that it was a great place and a quality of life, so we didn't have to rely solely on incentives. Our incentive was, you're getting a beautiful quality of life, low taxes, great place to live, AAA bond rating, so we want to make sure that we had a great place and did not have to rely on incentives. Sometimes, in my opinion, rely on incentives, you're getting to a point of desperation. That's my opinion. Our goal was that we wanted to make sure we had a quality community and we invested in place so that companies wanted to come and stay. This is the quality of life index. One of the challenges that you have is that you're competing with 2 other states, Arkansas and Mississippi. My hope is that there will be a tri-state regional approach in order to keep the jobs here, but someone has to track what the various states and cities are doing in your region. We did it more nationally to make sure we understood how we measured up to other municipalities, so we knew how to modulate or change our approach to make sure we had a very good cost of living index to make sure that we stayed very competitive. So the point I'm making is that to compete in a domestic global market, you must compete as a region. You rise as a region or you fall as a region. If Memphis starts to struggle, the rest of the region suffers. Same thing in Raleigh. If the region started to suffer, the whole region suffered. You must support one another, and the office park model, as Ellen eloquently put together, is fading away in the 21st century. So we had some lessons learned in the Research Triangle Park. If you did not know this, It started because people were going to our great University of North Carolina and leaving, going to other states, New York, California, because there was nothing there. They made a determination to do something which would create a research triangle park to do 3 critical links: universities, business, and government. And we decided that each one would play a role, and who knew that that would transform our economy till this very day. We carefully looked at what the research universities were providing. You can see it was well close to $2 billion in research dollars. They came up with something called the tech transfer, which attracted professors who could actually make money off of their inventions, and then the young people who want to participate in the research. Then you had businesses that aligned with those research programs, and then government made sure they got out of the way or supported the research triangle. So we were able to not only attract talented people in Duke and NC State and UNC, they stayed there after they lived because there were job prospects and it was a great quality of life. Just to show you what it's like to have young people in your region that have energy and entrepreneurship, we tracked the business filings per county in 2011. In Orange County, home of Chapel Hill, there were 950 business filings. These are people who want to now to start a business. In Durham County, it was 1,400. And in Wake County, which is Raleigh, 16,000. We created an environment, not just to have business come, but we wanted them to be homegrown. The Research Triangle became a fertile ground for innovation, for thinkers, for places where young people wanted to stay and grow a business. And so the universities, government, and the businesses all fed around one another to create this ecosystem, but we did this together as a region. Not one city can do this alone. We all relied on each other to be successful. Here's just another snapshot of the region to show you throughout the entire region, this is just the gaming video industry, how they were all connected and they all supported one another. So if you're looking to go into gaming industry, you now have a region to support you, not just one city. But we also focused on revitalizing our urban centers because for us, the downtowns were new golf courses. That's where deals get done. People walking on the street, on sidewalks, conversing, and before you know it, you have an app developer, a new idea, and things start to happen. That was very important to us in our city. We wanted the innovators, knowledge workers, and entrepreneurs to find what we call those third places where they can come together and start innovating for the future. And as was stated, RTP was no different. This big office park of 7,000 acres knew they had to change. And they finally said, that's it. We're going urban, because when I was working there, all my friends didn't want to work there. It was one big campus with trees. They wanted to walk and find cool places. And so they were saying, we can't keep young people working here anymore. They're going to go to other places in Durham and Chapel Hill and Raleigh. So finally, RTP came up with this incredible plan. You're seeing some images. They finished all the permitting, and now they're actually looking for a CEO to help start building phase 1. So if you're interested in the Research Triangle Park, they actually want to start creating those places because they realize it is time to change. Now, the last part I'm going to talk about is return on investment. I shared this with you the last time I was here. I love this phrase by the mayor of Chattanooga. If you are in a city where people want to live, you are in a city where people want to invest. So while I was in Raleigh, I kept hearing this issue about why are you investing in downtown? All the attention is in downtown. And I said, you know something, you're absolutely right, but I wanted the city council to realize that one role we can play is property tax and sales tax. That is a revenue we generate because land is a finite resource. It's actually a commodity, so we have to think differently about how we use it. So I put this together for the public to understand why downtown development was so important. So I simply told them if it would take 600 single-family homes on a 150-acre subdivision to equal the tax value of one of our downtown buildings on 1 acre. So you can have 150 acres or 1 acre to equal the same tax value. In other words, if you do not support downtown development, what you're really saying is, I'll pay the tax load. And in fact, that one high-rise on that 1 acre, you don't need schools, you don't need a level of infrastructure, it just made smarter sense. In fact, that downtown high-rise has 90 times the tax value per acre than that suburban acre. And people said, I had not thought about that before. We went a step further. That downtown high-rise on a 3-acre site pays off its infrastructure in 3 years. The return on investment is 35%. That suburban multi-complex on a 30-acre site pays off its infrastructure in 42 years. Return on investment is 2%. And so we started thinking differently about how we're going to plan for our city, because it just made better sense to be smarter about how we're using our precious resource. A colleague of mine came up with this chart, Joe Minicosi. We compared Walmart, which provides a lot of jobs, to a downtown building. The Walmart sits on 34 acres, that downtown building sits on a half acre. Real estate taxes on an annual basis for Walmart, $6,500. That downtown building, 10 times the amount. Well, what about jobs? Yeah, Walmart has jobs, but on a per acre basis, it was 6. For that downtown building, 74. We don't think this way. We don't present this information to City Council. This was a game changer in Raleigh about how we started thinking differently about how we zoned land and how we thought about land. In fact, we had to explain to our residents as we looked at the land value that what was the value of land on a per acre basis in our city, and this is what we came up with. The problem is that purple and blue, I really couldn't see it. So I asked my staff to put it in 3 dimensions, and when they did that, can you in the room tell me where downtown is? That downtown spike is probably paying the tax load for a third of the city. That downtown is allowing us to have a great lifestyle because of the amount of value it's creating. And as we add transit in our city, it's only going to spike throughout our entire city. So there was a question earlier about, does this approach actually add value? The answer is absolutely yes. So we did a comparison to show on a per acre basis the Walmart versus a 6-story mixed use, and look at the value on a per acre basis. These are policies that we control through zoning. This is us. We do it. And sometimes in government, we don't see ourselves as land developers or land planners, but we are, through how we zone and manage the land. So it changed our entire approach, and we realized we had to increase our land value, we had to increase our tax value, and so we launched a rezoning process to put the density where we wanted to see it, to be transit ready so that we could be a smarter city going forward. We share this information with the rest of the region, and many of them are following the same approach. I even went a step further and asked the council that to adopt this policy, that all major projects not tied to immediate life and safety capacity deficiencies should be subjected to return on investment analysis as part of the prioritization process. Do you want a larger road? Doesn't cut the ROI because it'll take 50 years for us to pay off that infrastructure. You want that road downtown or that street infrastructure improved? You pay off your infrastructure in 5 years, we're going to go there first. And it reset the way we did things, and they're doing it till this very day, a smarter approach toward planning. So by example, that new downtown development, we invested $25 million. Within 3 years, we got 6 years, we got $3 billion worth of development and an inexpensive and a quality place to live. As a result, Raleigh is one of the lowest tax places in North Carolina and has one of the best quality of life, in my opinion, in the entire state, if not in the country. So it shows that smart planning makes sense. Again, we share this with our regional partners, and now we have this regional approach on how we're going to be a very strong region that compete well with other places throughout the country. So my closing thoughts: a metropolitan region economy is a 21st century economy. You must understand the implications of long-term consequences of present actions and understand that no action is an action, and that too has consequences. Focus on what connects you as a region. You rise and fall as a region, so I would encourage you to begin to have a regional approach, a regional economic development unit that starts to examine both tri-state, bi-state, or even your region, how you compare and measure up and what you need to do. Smart regions understand their sense of urgency 10 years before it's urgent. Memphis Metro, I know you're smart. Thank you very much. Sorry if I went too fast. There's a clock here I was supposed to do in 30 minutes, and I did 30 minutes and 33 seconds. So now I believe there may be time for questions. Yes.
I've got one.
Yes.
Where are you going to get the land to do the transit system? Are you going on like old railroad?
Existing railroad right-of-way. And in some cases next to some existing roads, but for the most part there's an existing railroad right-of-way that we're going to use. One segment is an Amtrak, so that's going to be, well, existing railroad right-of-way. Yes, sir.
Do you all have severable development rights in the area when y'all rezone?
When you say severable,
Well, I guess marketable. I would just, in some of my reading, I've run into some counties that an acre has a development right, every acre within the county. And that if you're gonna put in the 7-story development, you need to get those development rights bought from a secondary market. I was just anticipating, I assume y'all had down zoning on some property when y'all went through and you probably had some unhappy characters.
No, well, we preceded all of our work with a plan, so we were very clear about the areas we would upzone and those that would remain the same. We primarily upzoned along corridors, older shopping centers, near downtown, or what we call growth centers, so the public knew the areas we wanted to rezone and upzone. The rest of the city, primarily the single family, virtually stayed the same. So we just focused on corridors and key growth centers, and as a result, we predicted 60 to 70% of all growth should happen in those areas. That's where we would entertain rezonings. The rest don't even come to us. And as a result, we're seeing older shopping centers, as Ellen was showing in other examples, that are now being repurposed, and now they're mixed use, where before they were just strip shopping. So that was our approach. Every land does have zoning, but the rezoning occurred in areas we wanted to be rezoned. Yes.
So Mitch, tell us what you know about Generation Z. Where is Generation Z going to want? How do they differ from Y? Or what are they going to be?
Correct. Generation Z, also known as the selfie generation, has a lot of similarities to Gen Y. They tend to be more, believe it or not, vegans, more conscious about the earth, very similar to Gen Y, but for now, they seem to be following the very same patterns as their older brothers and sisters. So the Gen Ys, I kind of joke around and say they're the ones that want to be CEO or president after 1 year on the job. That's usually a Gen Y. But they're very environmentally conscious. They prefer urban lifestyles, and we see the same pattern of the Gen Zs. Gen Zs are the ones that are right now entering college. I have a 19-year-old. She's a Gen Z. And right now they're looking at what the next generation is going to be. But Gen Z is very similar and lumped into the millennial generation. A lot of similarities. I think that is the end of our, oh, Ellen again.
How in Raleigh did you start the regional conversation?
We have about, as I stated, about 50 regional entities within our region. It's been there way before I got there. So historically, after the Research Triangle Park, we just started to compete as a region. In fact, when you get off the airport, the sign that you see is welcome to the Research Triangle region, not welcome to Raleigh, not welcome to Durham, welcome to the region. So that was part of our DNA, so it was quite easy. When it came to land use planning, that's where the friction started to really take place. That's when we said, let's focus on things that we can work on together, and that grew more into an economic development strategy for the entire region. So we don't have a Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, we have a Wake County Chamber of Commerce, and we all work together. But it's just part of our DNA. It's something we knew we could not compete. Raleigh couldn't compete on its own. Durham couldn't compete on its own, but collectively as a region, we're all able to compete. And now we compete with Silicon Valley, with Boston, Austin, all of those. Now they're regarded as one of the best research triangle parks in the country. But it's because it was part of our DNA, and because we didn't want our young people to keep leaving, that they came up with this approach. And now it's just part of our approach for everything. Yes?
How did parks fit into this strategy?
My parks?
In Raleigh?
Well, one, there's certainly it's a very green community, so the needs for parks in Raleigh is very different than the needs of parks in New York City, which is a very urban environment. But we still had a green print because we knew that what people love about Raleigh is that it's the first green city. It actually got an award, but it was more for their canopy, not for sustainable green. But this is a very healthy community. They love their greenways, great greenway system, over 100 miles. They're now building a new park downtown called Dix Park, their version of Central Park. So they know that people may sleep in their apartments or their homes, but they live out in the public realm, in parks and public spaces. And so for us to attract people that really want to enjoy the outdoors, you need great parks, great greenways, great bikeways, because the younger generation really enjoys the outdoors. So parks still fits into this plan. We had a green print, which I didn't get into. That was more part of the city's comprehensive plan. If anybody, I still probably have it, if you want a copy of how to do the return on investment, we actually have, I can send you instructions on how to do it. If you have a GIS layer with the tax information, it's very easy to perform. You'd be quite surprised by the results by seeing exactly what parts of your community is actually generating income on a per acre basis compared to other parts of your city. Okay, I take it you had a full day, you're all tired. We'll talk more out into reception.